Well, hello everyone. I am Joshua Barnes. I wanted to spend this morning and maybe just a few minutes talking about agents versus humans. But let me introduce myself first. I have worked for Salesforce for the last 10 years, roughly. I've had 3 careers in my life. I've been a network engineer. I was in sales, and then I did MarTech, roughly for 15 years after that. I also am a lead singer to a band called the it's a U2 tribute act called The Joshua Tree. And I thought what I would do is really just focus on something that I think is on a lot of people's minds right now, is agents. Agents versus humans. In the context of what I want to share is like agents versus humans. What will an agent do? How is the landscape going to change? And I'm hoping to go past some of the obvious stuff. I think most people feel like they understand that agents are going to make things more convenient. But will they make things more convenient? Or maybe just faster? Let's find out. So here's the first question. I wanted to start with the biggest, baddest question I could possibly ask right up front. What won't an agent be able to do? I think most people would start with, what can it do? I'm unconventional. I go to the other end of the spectrum. What won't it be able to do? My answer, in short, not much. And by the end of this, I hope you will begin to understand why I think that's a very credible claim. So let's start with this. What is an agent? Well, it's really, definitions may vary, but it's really just a grounded bot interface. It can retrieve and act upon unified data. It also has rules engines, sophisticated rules engines that can dynamically respond to user input. So dating myself here, but it's a great reference. So even if you haven't seen sort of the movie or don't know what I'm talking about, you ought to go watch Star Trek: The Final Frontier, where Scotty is being asked, and he's looking for some schematics, and he's interacting with a computer. And he's speaking to the computer as he expects the computer to respond. Well, that computer is an agent. That's basically what an agent did. And so he said, "Hello, computer." And the computer didn't respond, so he was unsure of what that meant. And then, of course, the person next to him said, "You have to use the mouse." And he picks up the mouse, and he talks, "Hello, computer." Great. Sorry about that. I clicked a button. It didn't respond. And then he said, "Why don't you just use the keyboard?" Oh, how quaint. And then he's interacting with it. So that is really exactly what an agent is. An agent has the ability to, within a rule set, it's going to retrieve and act on data, unified data specifically, based on the user input. So what is really the short-term value and the long-term value? Well, I think in the short term, I'll get into that. In a word, the matrix. Let me deconstruct what I mean by that. So in the short term, you're going to see things that are very obvious workflow optimizations, very obvious data capture, very obvious experience, an improved experience baseline. What would be an example of that? So if you have a retail website and you want to sort of outsource all of the customer service experience to a bot and allow that, or an agent rather, and allow that to mimic a customer service person, it can absolutely do that, and it's going to do it better and more consistently than a human can, and it's going to operate on grounded data that's obviously unified. No unified data, it's not going to work. So, in short, it's going to provide a lot of those optimizations, but the long term, and that's actually what I'm hoping to get into, really, and explore a lot of the cool things that agents are, I think, going to be able to do. My answer is the Matrix. Let me deconstruct that. What was the Matrix? When they went to the Merovingian and he asked him, what is the Matrix? He began to explain a bunch of software programs that interact with each other. And I really want you to grasp this. Think about this idea. A software program is just a piece of code. That's all that it is. It's a piece of code. But if that piece of code could, let me build on the analogy. Imagine that pieces of code were like bumper cars. And you have a container, an ice rink where the bumper cars interact, and they bump off each other, and no real damage is being done. It's kind of fun, and we're bumper carring, whatever, and that happens. And that's kind of the rule set of the agent, those bumper cars. Well, imagine those bumper cars are business processes like inventory, or marketing messaging, and they're bumping into each other. So what happens when inventory and marketing bump into each other? Oh, real-time inventory updates, right? That you could do that based on grounded data, and a human wouldn't have to be the interface. And in fact, you could say, well, we've already got that all automated. Yes, of course you do. But the question is on what interval have you got it updated? So you may say, well, at most companies I ever worked with was like 24 hours. Our inventory is updated every 24 hours. The fastest they got it down to is like maybe an hour. Well, that hour is still a window where an agent like a bumper car could go in and check with the data and pull it back and do a soft pull of that data. That's that bumper car analogy. Well, take it a little bit further. Imagine it's not bumper cars anymore. It's a racetrack, and the cars can go as fast as they want for as far as they want, and it is a competitive situation. And in that way, now you have something completely new, completely interesting, is you have agents building agents. And that was what sort of the problem was in the Matrix, is the agents became aware, self-aware, and they started building their own things, which led unsurprisingly to chaos. But the point is not to get into the philosophical aspects of it. The point is to understand that the necessary components for spontaneous creation or extemporaneous creation of content or software or those sorts of things is simply the ability for the agent itself to act autonomously. And that brings up the ability for agents to build either other agents or other little software programs. What would be an example of this? Well, today I can go into ChatGPT, which is nothing more than a user-prompted agent on semi-grounded data, and I could say, build me a calculator. Well, that's a software program. Imagine that I gave an agent the ability, the autonomy to go do those things. I'm going to create a learning site where students can come to my website and just tell the agent what they want it to do, and then the agent will go build it for them and give them options and allow them to interact with it as a means of teaching them to build out code. These are the kinds of realities that are absolutely possible and upon us. Like in my opinion, it's going to happen. So you have to be aware of the fact that this idea of agents just doing the efficient things humans don't want to or are not good at, if you thought it was going to end there, we need to rethink this. This is going much further than most of us can actually probably imagine. And that's what I'm trying to do, is imagine just exactly how far it can go. So let's look at some data and see if it points us at anywhere interesting. I'm gonna jump out of this presentation and go to a state of marketing report, and I want to pick up on a few things. I hope you can see this. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger just in case you can't. So if you look at marketers pursuing AI ambitions with some difficulties, right? So what's the goal? The top marketing priorities are implementing or leveraging AI as a whole, and I'll break down what, in my experience, that means for most companies. Improving the use of tools, improving ROI, engaging with customers real time. That one's pretty obvious. Building and retaining trust with customers. So what does this mean? I'll tell you exactly what it's meant in practice for the people that I've spoken to over the last 10 years. Everybody wants, we used to have this saying, like, there's no easy button in marketing. There's no push button and everything is done. Well, that's what most people think AI is. It's going to have the ability to discern clarity through ambiguity, meaning I can take an AI bot and throw it at data and it'll just go, boom, here's the smart thing you didn't know. Well, that's not real. That's impossible. The AI cannot be any more logical than your data is logical, which, it sounds like I'm trying to be super academic and smart. I'm not. I'm saying, the data is random and disorganized, then the only conclusion that you can draw from the data is exactly that it's random and disorganized. So that means we say that to say that your data is only as powerful as it is organized and articulable, meaning it has to be refined down into some sort of unified framework, unified baseline of understanding. Well, if you look at certain companies, what they're doing, they've unified all the data down to a single ID. That's a unified data model. That's a unified framework. That means that I can hypothesize what all of that stitching means, what this data point connected to that point actually can possibly mean in a certain context. Now an agent is powerful. It's able to do things, but that's not a panacea either. it means that the human still has to understand the context of what they're looking for. And that's the big secret of data, big data modeling and all those sorts of things. You could tell any story you want to with data, but you have to have kind of the story you want to tell and go see if the data supports your hypothesis. And that's basically just down to the scientific method. That's just how it works. So this is what most people want. They want to quickly organize their data in an actionable way. And now with agents, if you, again, starting with that premise, if you have unified ID, agents are definitely going to be able to do that. And then it's just a matter of pointing your focus. Where do I want to focus on? Do I want to focus on inventory? Do I want to focus on customer experience? Do I want to focus on, perhaps I'm a B2B sales company and I want to focus on making sure that all of my pipeline to my contact ratio. So as an example, like I have this, I'm 3x my pipeline and my contact ratio for the pipe is, let's say 5-to-1, which means it takes 5 contacts for every 1 piped opportunity before it actually gets created. I can then start modeling that with an agent and find out how good a sales rep is using the data immediately. An agent would be able to do that. That leads to number 2. So improving our use of tools and technologies. So this is an example. It's like, I don't necessarily want a new tool. I just want my tool that I already have to be sharper. So some of that is metadata. That's understanding how to look at the data more sharply rather than just simply finding a tool that visualizes what you couldn't see before. So AI is definitely going to be able to do this. But again, it's sort of like Russian dolls that are stacked. You have to start with a firm foundation of grounded data that's unified, build a context, ask an intelligent question. That's how it'll work. And people will refine that ability over time. And improve marketing ROI attribution. Again, that's, to me, this is a red herring. This is another non-starter. This is people wanting to point something they think is smart and new at an ambiguous problem. If the ROI, so think of data like sort of like a forest. If you think about data like a forest and your ROI is a lost boy in that forest, okay? If I'm looking in a forest and the lost boy just isn't there and I just don't know that yet, pointing AI at it is not going to find it. You'll just go in circles and you won't find anything. So the ROI actually has to be there. The attribution link actually has to be there. Otherwise, you can never find it with AI. And so that's actually one of the problems. You need an articulable data model that proves ROI before you can actually find the ROI, which sounds like the silliest thing in the world to say, but that's the reality of it. So oftentimes people are wanting to throw new technologies to solve an old world problem. The old world problem is I just need to make ROI the definition of my business. I just need to say A plus B equals C. Once I decide that, then the data can support my conclusion. Oftentimes people are very reticent to do that because of political fiefdoms, and marketing doesn't like sales and sales doesn't like marketing, and all that stuff is usually what prevents that progress from happening. But that's what they're looking for. Engaging with customers real time is really, really, really obvious and makes a lot of sense because of the fact is that most humans can't do it. Staffing it is difficult, and then also it's multimodal. So I also want to do this. I want to do this in a chat scenario, but I also want to do it from a content standpoint. The first time somebody shows up on my website, I want everything to be sort of personalized to their experience. So that's a good example of how that can be done. And then building and retaining trust with customers. I think this is kind of a big, it's a beachhead for consistency is really what they're saying there. So when you look at like say the United States as an example, you can see how they change. And it's really about driving ROI and leveraging AI in a general way, which I think indicates, given my definitions of them, I think it indicates a generalized level of immaturity rather than maturity. So going back to the presentation here, I just would like to say that I think what you're going to see is that the people are going to have to learn the workflows of what agents can actually do before they start getting smart and creative about what agents are going to be able to do. But I can pretty much assure you that, I shouldn't say can assure you, I'm convinced that what agents will be able to do is almost everything that a human can do, except for build an authentic, transparent relationship. Because ultimately an agent can never be accountable, but a human can. So I think people who are in sales they're kind of always going to have that role. You're always going to have that need. People are highly technical who understand how all the bits and the bobs and the gears and the knobs work. Yeah, those people are going to be necessary. Everybody in between? Maybe not. So, what do I think the fundamental changes will be? It's complicated and nuanced, more nuanced than you might think. So, for example, a lot of talk has been made about you're not going to need developers anymore. Well, that's fundamentally not true. If you've used ChatGPT at all, you can see that it can produce vast amounts of code fairly accurately. What it can't do, and check this out, I'll give you a test. Have you ever given Chat or Claude or any of them a prompt that they didn't know the answer to? They weren't certain of the answer? I mean, this is like talking to a 12-year-old, right? Every time you ask a 12-year-old boy, you ask him a question, of course he knows the answer, right? Of course he does, because he doesn't know what he doesn't know. And while Chat or AI does know what it doesn't know in a certain sense, it doesn't know how to present itself with humility, because it's not a human. This is, again, one of the problems. This is a whole other topic, but, sentient capability, I'll go into that at some point, but that is just mindlessness. It's not a human. It'll never be human. There's no consciousness there, but I could understand why people would think it would be, because it can mimic some of the features of consciousness pretty well. Very well, actually. So what does this mean in the development context? Well, it means that it'll produce a bunch of code. Most of it will work, but some of it won't. And the problem with code is when you have even just a few hundred lines of code, if your logic is erroneous in just one line or just one character, it won't work, or it won't work effectively. And unfortunately, ChatGPT or these other bots, agents, won't always know where it made a mistake, because it's not thinking through it like a human would. It's thinking through it like a human has. Do you understand? It's copied people, so it's copying mistakes. Does it improve? Of course. Can it improve faster than human? Of course. But that doesn't change the underlying flaw or premise that it is copying. It is not originating. It is not building. See, when a human learns a skill, it learns it at a first principle. When a carpenter learns how to do finished carpentry, that person understands how to create from a first principle, the order that things must happen, otherwise errors will occur. When you copy, you didn't learn the same skill. You took the output and worked backwards. That's not exactly the same, and it can almost never produce the same output as someone who's learned the process to begin with. So when I say it's complicated, we're not going to get rid of developers. What we're going to do is we're going to have fewer of them, and they will be the best developers, and their job will be to be debugging. That's all they'll do. So the agent will create all of the code, and the developer will be turned into a maintenance department. There's no more innovation. They don't need the innovation. The bot will do all the work, and the developer will just do what the bot can't do well, which is debug in those cases. And I think basically every industry is like that. So if you use that as a formula for your job or portions of your job, that's a good way of looking at it. What is it that an agent could never do because it cannot fundamentally create itself? It can't originate or be original in any way. It's not able to do that. Everything it knows, it knows from copying something. And then work backwards to, well, if that means that smart people are going to stay, what would they do that the computer can't do? And that may lead you into some interesting thought patterns for how to think about how the landscape will change. Now, the reason I don't try and spend the time to enumerate all the possibilities is because there are just simply too many of them. There's too many ways in which it can all tumble, but I think starting from a principle will give you a better formula to think about. So what's the conclusion? I would say get great with logic and philosophy at least, and also one coding base. A coding base could be like something as simple as HTML, JavaScript. If you want to get into Python or some other languages, that's great. It's not because you're always going to need that, but it is because the creativity of where we're going from digital is largely going to depend on some form of software development, some form. Now, I think where the world is going is, I'll make a couple of predictions and wrap this up here. We're nearing 20 minutes. I expected this to be like 5. Of course, it's just like me. I think what you're going to see is autonomous, human, voice-driven creation of software. You can already do it. You can go to ChatGPT today and say words, and it'll respond to you and create things. But what I think you're going to see is the elimination of websites. You won't need them. You're going to have software be created purely by voice prompt and the ability to perform tasks inside of your house, perform tasks inside of your business, perform tasks inside of your workflows, and it'll simply be just voice driven. And it'll speak back to you and that will be the way in which we confirm the logic, because if you tell software to operate around pure form of logic in terms of words, it can do that. So I would say what you're going to see is the elimination of most of the things that we take for granted right now, like website, search, content creation. All of that is going to fundamentally change into voice-driven, activated stuff where humans who have notable experience in those areas are going to be able to create with scale unprecedented. And then the question will be, how do you keep it? How do you keep it running at the same scale? Because the amount of work that can be done in such a short amount of time will mean, yes, there'll be a lot more time for the human, but also a lot less work for everybody. So how does that going to translate in this society that we live in? So that's the end. I hope this was helpful, but what I was trying to do here today is to create some content tackling a problem that I see in the world. This is the kind of thing that I see that needs to be done, and so I wanted to give my contribution to you. Have a great day. Make it a great Friday.